Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the August 8th River Falls City Council meeting. First thing we'll do is stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Chrissy, can I have a roll call, please?
Bierstead.
Here.
Bjork.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Downing.
Here.
Morset.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Odine.
Here.
Okay, next we have approval of minutes from the July 25th meeting.
I so move. Second.
First and second, questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have approval of the bills with Ms. Miller.
Mayor and Council, I make a motion to approve the bills in the amount of $2,002,811.79, subject to the comptroller.
Second.
First, second, questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we'll go into public comments. We're going to limit public comments to 2 minutes tonight. So if you want to come on up, come on up. Make sure you sign in, name, address, phone number, and also say it so we can get it on the minutes. So anybody want to come up for public comments? Now would be the time.
Hi, my name is Krista Cleary. I've lived in River Falls my whole life. I currently live in the town of Clifton on 880th Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to address the City Council. I recently learned about the anti-camping ordinance, which was approved by the City Council to address the issue of people sleeping in public areas or sleeping in their vehicles. I read the language in the ordinance and it struck me that this really isn't about camping, which is something people do for recreation or leisure. It's not an anti-camping ordinance. Let's be real, it's a homeless harassment ordinance. Homelessness is a growing problem everywhere in the US, not just River Falls. This problem is not unique to our community, and it's influenced by national and global economic pressures. We didn't create the problem, but we have to deal with it. It's increasing because it's becoming too expensive to pay for housing. Wages are not rising in accordance with inflation, and housing prices have ballooned beyond inflation. I'm going to give an example. I lived in a house 1 block from here, and in 1985, that house sold for $35,000, okay? We adjust that for inflation, and today that house would be worth $98,000. Is there a home in River Falls that one can buy that's got plumbing and a yard for less than $100,000? This is what people are dealing with. I don't know how people fall through the cracks. How are people supposed to live? This recent anti-camping ordinance is an attempt to address the problem by harassing the individuals who are suffering from the problem that they did not create. They are not the ones responsible for this, but the city has decided to criminalize them. People in these circumstances are in very precarious positions, and one of them said to me today, she said, "One fine could make or break me." This is a single mom living in her car with her kids. That's what she said to me today. That's why I'm talking to you, okay? Because they don't want to get in front of a camera and a microphone and say this. This is what you're doing to them. Not only is this ordinance cruel and misguided, it is unconstitutional. You can look this up online. There's plenty of evidence for how this is illegal. I'm going to quote from the Ninth Circuit Court, who said in 2018, the Eighth Amendment prohibits the imposition of criminal penalties for sitting, sleeping, or lying outside on public property for homeless individuals who cannot obtain shelter. At a previous meeting, there was reference to housing resources, but I'm not sure what that is. When people are told to go to housing resources, they get put on a list, and they stay on that list waiting to get into housing for months or sometimes over a year. What are they supposed to do? The city needs to be taking steps to protect the people who live here instead of enacting unconstitutional laws which target the victims of these predatory and oppressive economic practices. These people have a right to not be harassed. I'm almost done. Thank you. The task is a challenging one, and it is going to involve confronting powerful economic entities that are preying on our communities and not punching down on the people suffering under them. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thanks. Anybody else have anything?
I once again appear before you on behalf of River Falls' most vulnerable residents. Last time I appeared, Mayor Tolan chose to comment that he had quit listening a long time ago. In fact, it seems he quit listening during our first face-to-face meeting when he denied there was an unofficial no camping policy, which was used to bully homeless residents into fleeing River Falls city limits, and that an RFPD officer had unlawfully taken the license plates from homeless couples' vehicles. These were ugly truths, which he rejected as being too odious to accept and decided instead to make believe were untrue. I've offered to provide solid evidence on those and other ugly truths of how extreme poverty is criminalized in River Falls, but following Mayor Tolan's example, nearly every city council member has chosen to actively avoid their duty to investigate my claims of unethical and unlawful conduct by those they oversee. Here are some other ugly facts. River Falls' unofficial no camping policy was replaced by a no camping ordinance, which is employed to bully homeless citizens. The service providers of River Falls do not have the ability to help into leaving the city limits. It spent thousands of dollars to do so and incurred a huge legal liability. These mostly disabled residents deserve at a minimum a safe place to sleep, even if they must provide it for themselves. The city attempts to deny that to them, and by selectively enforcing the new no camping ordinance, they do so. This is not a solution. It's inhumane, unethical, and an unlawful way to avoid dealing with the unavailability of adequate, affordable housing for disabled individuals in River Falls.
10 seconds.
If you choose to continue to ignore the problem of homelessness in River Falls, please have the decency to allow the homeless to create a safe place to rest without fear of being targeted. The existing support system for these residents is overwhelmed and cannot find shelter for all the growing numbers of River Falls residents.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience, anything like to say? Okay, we'll move on. First thing we'll do is close the council hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgot all about our presentation from the Merchant McIntyres. Brent and Tristan are here to give us a little presentation on what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. Tristan's plugging in so we can have a couple of slides up for our presentation. While he's doing that, I will just start with a few comments following up on our previous conversations held virtually. We're in River Falls. We appreciate Scott and the team hosting us last night and today to see firsthand for the first time some of the projects that we're working on. We also had some working meetings to talk about our future approaches and the projects that we're going to be working on in the coming months. We've had what we believe to be a productive day, seeing and really strategizing on some of the major infrastructure and economic development funding opportunities that we're going to be pursuing, and also collaborating further on the Kinney Corridor effort. We had a really impressive walk around the trails and down the river, and appreciated the time the staff spent with us on that. It is increasingly clear to us as we've worked over the last several months and then here today that the city has significant assets with which you can attract federal funding. I think we've talked about that in the past, and I know that all of you believe that. You also have what we consider to be, based on our reach kind of across the country with our local government clients, a best-in-class team of professionals led by Scott and including others that we've met with today. All are committed to this effort and have been really fantastic to work with over the last several months. So special thanks to you, Mr. Mayor, for your contributions to our effort thus far, Scott, Jennifer, Amy, Chief Cash, Ellen, Carrie, Todd, and all the others with whom we've worked thus far. We'll spend a few minutes tonight just providing you with an update on our efforts to date and what is planned in the coming months. And we'll, of course, appreciate your feedback and input, any questions you might have as we go through that presentation. Kristen.
Great. So I'll open up by telling a little bit about our process and how we work with the city week to week to explore federal funding opportunities that we've identified through our initial resource inventory process, where we spoke with different city personnel, identified priorities, and then through the spreadsheets that you're seeing above, work to track those week to week. So specifically, we've outlined federal funding opportunities that we've identified that are collated with infrastructure priorities, public safety priorities, environmental opportunities, and then worked to identify the relevant city staff that we will form federal funding applications with. As you can also see, we've developed systems for tracking the city's congressionally directed spending requests. This is, a fairly involved and long-term process, so it's useful for us, and I think useful in our conversations with the city to help track those requests as they move along through, a frankly uncertain congressional funding process. So the tools that we've developed and worked with the city to employ on a biweekly basis, and when we're exploring a specific funding opportunity on a more regular basis, have allowed us to really hit the ground running and begin pursuing pretty substantive grants early on in our partnership. So telling a little bit about what we've been awarded, what we've submitted, and what is still pending. Earlier, actually I think it was just last month, was notified that the city was awarded $38,200 for business recruitment at the St. Croix Valley Business Innovation Center, funding that will be utilized to promote recruitment, retention, and ultimately staff retention to oversee specific business recruitment activities at the SVBIC. Also enabled by the visit to DC by the mayor and Scott to immediately pursue funding through the community project funding process in Congress. So at this point in time, we've secured $1,400,000 for renovations to the River Falls Fire Department station, which has been included in the House Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration Appropriations Bill. This funding, while included in the House bill, has also received support from the city's Senate, members of the city's Senate delegation as well. We anticipate that as the federal funding and appropriations process continues to move forward in Congress, that this request is really well positioned thanks to the work from the mayor and Scott, and the extensive input that we've gotten from Chief Cash as well to submit the strongest possible application. We also just last month were able to submit a request for Safe Streets and Road for All funding. This work thankfully was supported by the council as well through the resolution that you all passed in support of the Vision Zero priority from the Biden administration. This request will provide $200,000 for the development of a Safe Streets action plan. Through if awarded, this action plan will then enable the city to pursue additional implementation funding for specific roadway safety projects. Notably, at the beginning of our partnership, we were also able to work with Chief Cash to support another application on behalf of the fire department for just over $1 million in two combined requests, one for a new water tender for the department, as well as upgraded radio communications equipment. Now we'll talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that we are actively working on for the city right now.
Yeah, so next week, we expect, based on our work with the Department of Transportation, they'll release funding for the Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program. Several units, local government, other groups, associations in DC, folks like ourselves have been working with the Department of Transportation for a long time to ensure they understand the realities, what it takes for a city like River Falls to actually apply for and implement federal DOT grants. Extremely difficult to pursue and to target, to complete all of the technical information required to be competitive. That request will help build and enhance capabilities and capacity you have within your city staff to provide additional funding to get you competitive, get you more competitive for Department of Transportation funding moving forward. We're also already speaking with the Economic Development Administration. The city has worked with the EDA in years past, and we are talking with the EDA at the regional level now, considering a request of up to $2 million for further expansion at the Business Innovation Center. That requires a number of additional steps in the application process, but the interaction with the EDA at the regional level has been excellent. Scott, Carrie, and other members of the team conducted that call just a few weeks back, and there's a great deal of interest in continuing those conversations and seeing an application over the next couple of months.
Yeah, notably, we've also sought to help the city in pursuing congressional engagement as it relates to the Kinney Corridor project and specifically the ongoing partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers on feasibility study. This congressional engagement, as that feasibility study moves forward, as well as the Corps' future efforts related to the Kinney Corridor move forward, that engagement will help us maintain solid federal oversight of those efforts, as well as hopefully, pursue additional funding as we move into an implementation phase for the Corps' work related to the Kinney Corridor.
So those funding opportunities are a huge part of where we see the most success for all of our clients, but especially our units of local government, our cities and our counties, is the ability to really forecast what's coming. Can we get ahead of a grant opportunity in enough time to give staff and to give writers all that they need to really be competitive for these grants? And that is almost always a longer period of time than what the agency gives you. The 90 days or 75 or 60 days they put into these solicitations once they're officially released. So we are talking now about the fiscal year 24 Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant Program, known as RAISE. Before that it was BUILD. Before that it was TIGER. And with every administration, they'll find a new creative acronym when they put the grant out. So that is a kind of a multifaceted grant program for capital and planning projects that can address kind of your basic surface transportation needs throughout the city.
We're also taking a look ahead, although it's hard to believe we're already thinking about FY25 congressionally directed spending requests, thinking about priority projects that may not be easily suited to another grant application opportunity. Those are conversations that we'll continue having with city staff in the fall so that we can identify a project that we can hit the ground running on once the FY25 appropriations process kicks off early in winter 2024. In addition to the two other opportunities that you can see above, so body-worn camera policy implementation, specifically providing up to $2 million for purchase or lease BWCs, as well as planning efforts. We have the charging and fueling infrastructure program, which covers efforts to deploy EV charging or other alternative fueling infrastructure throughout the country. These are just two examples of programs that we've started having conversations with the city on. There are going to be a number of other opportunities that we explore based on some of the larger big picture projects that Brent identified. I think our goal is to move forward under the umbrella of these bigger programs like RAISE and the EDA program, while also seeking out as available specific funding opportunities that we can use to address some of the needs when it comes to these larger projects. So we have a pretty full agenda, many opportunities that we've identified ahead that we're excited to continue partnering with you all on to pursue.
Yeah, so thank you. Based on the agenda, we're happy to take any questions now. We're also happy we will be sticking around if there are questions afterward. I think just again to thank Scott, Jennifer, and the entire team, what we've accomplished today being here in town. It takes a lot of effort just to take somebody around and not do your regular work until later in the day. So we're just highly appreciative. We feel like we've gained greater insight into priority projects. We're not going after every grant that's out there. It's tempting every time you see an email come across your desk, say, okay, we want to go after this one and this one and this one. Reality is we have to be targeted. We have to align that to the capital improvement plan, to the priorities that Scott and the team direct for us. And we've gained a greater insight into how we're doing that over the next several months. It also helps us when we see things to strengthen our voice when we're advocating for the city in DC with members of your congressional delegation and their staff, right? To be able to say, we've seen it, we were just there. It ramps up their attention they pay to us and how we make certain arguments, both on the Hill and with agency personnel. We'd like to continue to call on you, as we've done with the mayor coming to DC, Scott coming to DC, and also, as Tristan mentioned, with the Safe Streets resolution, we will call on the council as needed to do certain things like that moving forward that will make our grant applications more competitive with funders. We are looking to get every point we can on every application, so we'll leave no stone unturned and we'll call on you as needed. So again, we appreciate any additional feedback or questions, and we'll stick around after the meeting if there are further individual thoughts or ideas.
Any questions? Anybody got any questions, Tom? No?
I guess just something to think about in the future, but I'm not expecting an answer right now. But there's new innovation grants. We talked about them just briefly in our joint meeting with the school board. And maybe if you get a chance to go over what that could look like for our city with the city staff, this would be a good time to get ahead of the rest of the cities. So thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, next move on to public hearing. Close the council hearing and open up the public hearing. This ordinance 2023-11. This is an ordinance creating Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.5 Corporate Park Zoning District. And this is the second reading and the disposition. Is there anybody on it that has anything like to say about this? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and open up the council hearing, and I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we adopt ordinance 2023-11, creating the Title 17 zoning.
Second.
First and second, questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we will close the council hearing and open up a public hearing on ordinance 2023-12, amending official traffic control map. This would be a no right turn on red. This is Division to Main Street. This is the second reading and disposition. And is there anybody in the audience that has anything to say about this?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Eric Amundson, 500 Marcella Court in River Falls. I said a couple of concerns, I guess, and just some personal input regarding this. I like the grant. I like the idea of what's being done at the Main and Division Street intersection. I'm a little, I don't know if I'd call it concerned, but wondering out of curiosity why we're doing a no right on red when traveling east on Division and then would be attempting to turn south on Main Street. I don't know if staff has a presentation or anything regarding this, or if it's just something, whatever, but I was curious if that was part of the grant or if that's something that could possibly be removed as an amendment on here regarding the grant. The reason I ask is I live on the west side of town, and somebody that travels that road and turns multiple times onto Division or onto Main from Division, it could be a hassle at times because of the space that's there. If someone is in front of you, there's no right-hand turn lane. So it is going to be quite restrictive. My wife and I also have e-bikes. We get out biking quite a bit, travel that road as well. I'm not sure where all these safety concerns came about. Just in some of the research that I've done, I'm not aware of any reported incidents of motor vehicle accidents or pedestrians or bicyclists at that intersection. So I guess I'm wondering where the restriction for the right turn, no right on red for that specific direction. There's no other restrictions on southbound Main Street going west on Division or north Main Street east on Division. So kind of wondering how that all came about. And I'm not expecting answers tonight. Obviously, it's a public hearing. I just want to voice, it's not displeasure, but it's more or less, it really could create an inconvenience, some possible traffic backups. The timing with those lights is already a little bit on the heavily delayed side. We'll just leave it at that. When you are at that intersection, whether you're headed north, east, southwest, whatever, off a Division. So that was it. Like I said, I don't know if staff has a presentation or not regarding this, but just my things. I would ask that you take out, if possible, or at least reconsider taking out the no right on red. I did speak with Mayor Toland and a couple others too regarding this. I know it is a trial, and got no problems with the trial. It's just the no right on red. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Is Todd here?
You
want
Mayor,
just
you
to
wanna-
kind of,
do you want to just keep the public hearing
oh,
open?
sorry.
It's your prerogative running the meeting.
No,
You
I can close it. I'm sorry.
presentations is part of the public
Else in the
hearing.
audience has anything like to say about this? Okay, we'll close the public hearing, open up the council hearing, and we'll take a motion on this, so we can have Todd give us a little talk on the reason for the right on red.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of ordinance 2023-12, amending the official traffic control map.
Second.
First and second, okay. Todd, can you give us just a little quick synopsis?
Absolutely. So the no right turn on red that you've just voted on, that was a recommendation from the consultant that prepared the bicycle and pedestrian plan. And the intent with the no right on red is to make sure that as bicycles, cyclists are staged to cross the street when the light turns green, that there aren't cars trying to get around them and take a right turn onto southbound Main Street, because that corner is, it's not a 90-degree corner, it's an acute angle. So when cars do take that right-hand turn, they tend to brush their right front tire, the right side of their vehicle close to the curb, and kind of pushes cyclists waiting to move across the intersection up onto the sidewalk. So that was the intent, but again, this is a demonstration project. If it doesn't work, it's undoable.
And clarification there too on I think that's in the memo, but if it's not clear in the memo, that the demonstration project doesn't require you to have a no turn on red. So the council can decide they don't want to do that part of the demonstration. That was, there was a treatment for all four corners of the intersection in the bike and pedestrian plan, but that wasn't affordable. So we picked, we selected the corner we thought we could have the highest impact. And then we also saw that this was a pretty low cost way to impact that other corner. So it's not something that will have us sending the money back to AARP if you don't do. It's something that staff recommends is, as long as we're trialing a number of things at the intersection, this is a low cost way to trial that. And it's true, I don't think we have significant accident data there. I don't think we have any loss of life. At that intersection, there's loss of life near that intersection. That's the data I remember.
Yeah, I'd have to look back, and it was documented in the bike bed plan what the traffic incidences were at that intersection. I can't recall what it was off the top of my head.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah,
Mayor?
yeah.
And I don't know if this is a question directed for Mr. Simpson or for City Engineer Nikolewski, but we talk about this being a demonstration project, and I think 6 months has been bannered around as sort of the time frame. Is there something on a calendar in 6 months that you guys are going to come back and say, hey, what do you think? You want to keep it? Or is it going to be no problems, let's just leave it? Or how are we going to, what's that deal?
There isn't anything on the calendar unless the council chooses to to direct us that you want it back at a certain time, but the plan is to see how long the paint lasts and how many times we replace the bollards, and if it becomes a maintenance issue, then we likely would come back sooner than later, or we're expecting that this is part of a trial. If we can do a few of these trials before we go through the downtown planning process, then we'll at least have more information about what people actually in River Falls think about some of these treatments, rather than showing them a 2D picture and saying, this is what we ought to do at Second and Division, and we ought to do this at Second and Walnut, and we ought to do, it gives us the opportunity to do some demonstrations in the next 2 years before we do, before you're actually asked to approve curb and gutter changes and other things. So I'd say we want it to go as long as it'll last to get as much of a trial period as possible, but you shouldn't get the impression that this is some kind of statistically significant surveyed experiment. That's not what it is. It's a quick demonstration project. There may be some people for the first time ever seeing what a bollard and I can't remember what the little drive over things are called, but
I don't know what they're technically called, but when we're out laying them out, we call them high tops.
so it's helpful for people to be able to connect with the actual treatments. And it is intended to inconvenience vehicle traffic to the benefit of non-vehicle traffic. That's what these treatments are for, is you're providing some inconvenience to somebody in an air-conditioned, likely, or heated car sitting. They are inconvenienced by so many seconds or fractions of seconds, so that somebody who's on a bike or pedestrian or a stroller or a motorized scooter has some increased perception of safety and hopefully some real safety increase.
And one, it's not technically on the calendar, but the high tops and the bollards will be gone for winter, so we can remove snow. And depending on the condition of the paint, when spring arrives in 2024, may drive the decision to put them back up or not.
I have a question on that right turn, and I have to agree with Mr. Amundson in some regards on this. If we have no right turn on there, that means that traffic's waiting, the bikes are waiting, there's not a green arrow. So when the green light happens, the cars go. So are the cars and the bikes going already? And if you had a right turn on a red light where it's allowable, the bikes still have to wait. The cars could turn and get out of the way of the bike. So I think it's actually more hazardous having a no right turn on the red light there. So I would like to see an amendment to what's been proposed, because I think it's less safe than not having it.
Speaking as a bicyclist, I guess I would disagree. I've lived in River Falls since '92 and ridden my bike all over town, and that's one of the hardest, as a pedestrian or a cyclist, is one of the hardest intersections to cross, to feel safe crossing, because it's one of the major intersections in town. It's where everything goes through downtown. So I am all in favor of let's try it. Let's slow traffic down. I think anything we can do to make it feel safer for pedestrians or cyclists, particularly at that intersection, is something we should try.
We keep talking about safe, but I think we also have to acknowledge that there aren't people getting hit right now, are there? Are there?
We don't want to wait until there is.
So I mean, what's the criteria for success is part of what I'm asking. Could you tell me what the criteria for success of this is?
You get to decide that. I mean, ultimately, it's that when you're doing the downtown planning, you're going to be asked, the community is going to be asked as a whole, and then ultimately the council is going to be asked as the approver of the document, are you satisfied that what has been proposed by planners, engineers, and city administrators adequately addresses what you think their concerns of the community are? we can advise you based on technical studies and other things, what we think will have, what the impact will be. But you're still dealing with humans making decisions, and so is this gonna guarantee there's no accidents or an increase in accidents? No. I mean, there's always the confusion factor too. Anytime we change a treatment at an intersection, you've introduced some kind of confusion to people that are used to it being a certain way, which is why we have the intersection of Second and Division the way it is. It doesn't make sense to most of us people who are new entrants to city. I've been here 15 years now, and I still like, why does Division Street stop for Second Street? But if you change that intersection, you could have a lot of problems if you don't do it carefully. So this is a sample for people to see the physical changes. We could have chosen a different intersection that had more accidents, car and bike collisions, car pedestrian collisions. You likely it would have been more intensive for us to do, and you probably would have had to do more of the four corners. This was a way for us to try to pick an area and see how to demonstrate it.
So when does this come back to us then to weigh in on it again?
Well, I think
we're to go forward with it.
So I think what you've heard is this demonstration is likely less than a 12-month shelf life. I mean, even if everything comes back in the spring and the paint's great, we can put everything out. 2 winters is there's no paint that's going to last through the 2 winters. So that's going to wipe that out. So if we were going to do something longer term, we'd have to come back again. Or if the paint goes and staff's not convinced it was that helpful, we don't hear from council that, oh, we really like it, we want to keep it, then it probably just goes away. There isn't necessarily another action, again, unless the council wants one. So you can direct us that you want us to report back in 6 months with a detailed report on what we saw and observed, or you can just say, try it. And if it works out for us, let us know or come back.
I would like to know if there is an uptick in accidents on the no right turn, if we're going forward with this in that study. The information collected.
So then you would probably want to make an amendment to the ordinance. Let's see, would you have to amend the ordinance or just do a resolution separately afterward, or a motion separately that they want to report back to
I
council?
don't think an amendment to the ordinance is necessary. I think you can just request staff to report back in 6 months.
I'd like to see, I don't know that 6 months is enough time, because 6 months is gonna put us, what, about March? We're not even gonna have things, the bollards back up. My hang up, and I expressed my concerns, are not so much about the right on red. Sorry, Mr. Amundson. But the St. Bridget side, I think that's more of a challenge from backing up traffic, especially around school release time for St. Bridget's. I'd like to see this come back. I'd like to give them until like May to see it back, so that we can go through not only the fall season of school, but the spring season of school. I'm not jumping up and down about this project, and I'm willing to give them give staff an opportunity to do a demonstration project. I would have liked to seen it done on a different intersection, but this is the one that is in front of us, so we have to take action on this today. I think my request to staff, and whether that's just a direction, city attorney, just
Direction is sufficient.
Direction is sufficient. I'd like to see this come back to us at the second meeting in May.
Yep.
I have a quick question for you, Todd, as well. Just traffic. Currently, do you know the highest, I'll say density of traffic, the time frame when school is in session?
I don't know that off the top of my head. We have traffic counters, and we are planning to collect some traffic count data when school starts.
I share the concerns that Mr. Morse alleviated to or referenced, because I have kids at St. P's, and that's just, there's no fun any way you choose. And so I'm happy with this to come back, and I almost would argue we should have the ability to come back sooner if we really see, I'll say, epic failure, just meaning results are not lining up well. And so it does come back and we just abort a test and say, no, we've looked at 3 months and it's bad. That I think allows us also to make the argument to residents that we're just being responsive in advance. I don't know how to add that in, or if you'll just promise to give us an update, maybe right before the holiday season, sometime in December. That would satisfy me.
I would be happy to do that. If that's good with you.
Yeah, so what I heard is probably a December update, and then we typically only have one meeting in December, so likely the first meeting in December. And then I heard probably more information, more comprehensive information within 12 months, probably in the spring, summer, May, second meeting is the goal. I guess if you want it for sure on the second meeting, maybe we can bring it back.
I just proposed a second meeting because I felt that would give us a look at the fall school traffic. We're taking it out for the winter, we're putting it back in, and let's say late March, we can see it again, see another example of it.
Yeah, I don't see that as a significant workload issue for us.
Okay.
That is one of the measures of success, I guess, of a demonstration project is, did you get any information out of it that was helpful going forward? And you really do get to be the judge of that, because I don't think internally staff has a very strong opinion about any particular treatment or measure. We're not thinking this is we don't know. That's why we want to demonstrate it.
Right, and we don't know. And one thing that we do know about these types of this work is that there's no one size fits all. I mean, this was done by a design firm that designs these types of intersections all over the country. This was their recommendation for River Falls, and what works in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Pittsburgh may not be what is right for River Falls too.
Okay, anything else from anyone? So you come back to us in December with some preliminary stuff in the next May okay. Everybody okay with that? Yep. Okay.
I've just got one final question. Thanks to staff. I know that, the bike and ped plan has a lot of stuff in it, and I'm happy to see at least one pilot project being started right away. And I suspect that any of the pilot projects will involve some change that can be difficult at familiar intersections.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we got a first and a second on ordinance 2023-12, amending the traffic control map to create a no right turn on red on Division to Main. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, next we'll move on to the consent agenda. First one is a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for 879th Avenue with the town of River Falls. Next one is a resolution revoking a license agreement for property located at 235 Highway 35 North. Does anybody want to pull anything?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull number 5.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull number 6.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Morissette.
I think this is a great solution to the concerns that were expressed by the residents on 879th. I also want to recognize the good work that happened. I think people expect us to work with our intergovernmental partners, the towns and the villages and the school boards and different places. So I think that's a great example of what we can do together to come up with these solutions. The one thing that I'm concerned about, and having just talked about the last situation, I think maybe this can be just staff direction. I'm not sure, but in the report, it says that there's a lot of information about how we're going to pay for it, which is to be determined. I view the one of the very top priorities is fiscal responsibility of taxpayers' money, and I don't know how we're going to pay for this right now. So before any work goes forward, I would ask that we would direct staff to come back with a completed sources and uses and help us understand better what that looks like. I can put it in the form of a motion to amend the resolution, but it doesn't sound like we need that. Is that true, Mr. City Attorney?
Correct. So by adopting this intergovernmental agreement, you're committing to performing these actions. Where the money is going to come from is to be determined. So you can ask staff to prepare a report as to where those funds will
Okay.
come from.
So I'd ask the staff to prepare that report and get it back to us before any dollars are spent. I targeted a 60-day window, which I think is more than enough time for staff to come up with that, but I don't know how others feel about that, but that's my request.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Yeah, I would support that. We usually are, we usually have a lot of information about exactly where things are being funded, and I really appreciate that aesthetic. So this seemed, I too would like to know where the funding is coming from.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
so I gotta make a motion, don't I?
Yep.
'Cause I pulled it. I make a motion, we approve the resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for 879th Avenue within the town of River Falls.
Second.
First and second, any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Downing, you pulled 6.
Resolution revoking license agreement for property located at 235 Highway 35 North. My question's for Mr. Simpson. Could you just give everyone a brief history of why the recommendation? I want to be able to make sure I'm hearing from every side and the detail of it, because it sounds like this person's between a rock and the hard place, but they also understood what they were getting into. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna speak for the property owner. I guess that's not fair for me to do that. I can tell you what my perspective is. So the reason that council's being asked for this action is that you've entered into a developer's agreement for the sale of the lot. And part of that is to not have other encumbrances on the lot. So to satisfy what you've agreed to in the development agreement, the council needs to take action to revoke the license. I'm not recommending further actions as part of that revocation, but the council can direct if you're concerned about the property owner's access through other parts of our property. You can do anything up until including directing the city administrator to provide access at a different point on a different lot. I'm not providing that recommendation to you. I think we would want to hear further from the landowner what they propose, but yes, generally speaking, I think there should be a lot of awareness about all of the possible outcomes here by that property owner, given that I've had multiple communications in writing and at council meetings since 2012 at least. So there's probably been 7 or 8 actions by either myself on your behalf or the council specifically, with annexation and rezoning and easements and licenses and revocation of easements and annexation agreements and then ultimate annexation. So there's been a number of actions to lead to this point. And then we provided notice that we're doing this. So that's, I guess, does that cover the questions that you had or kind of the background?
Said kind of in the middle when you were talking about why, you weren't going to get into why you were not providing one, but is there an example where you might?
Sure. I mean, the property owner could purchase access on a different part of our lots. That's been something we've talked about before with the property owner. The property owner could sell the lot to somebody that wants to combine it with one of our existing lots. The property owner could ask for a permanent easement on the property at some specific point. So there's a number of options there. I suggest that we have certainty about what I believe you need to do based on what you've agreed to in the developer's agreement, what you understood you were agreeing to.
Yeah.
And the city has never had the responsibility to provide access to that property. We've done it as a neighborly thing. And I wouldn't rule out us providing it in the future, but I think first I would suggest you first have to make the action to remove this and then deal with whatever you have after.
So you're suggesting that they can work with the city afterwards is part of what you're saying?
I've suggested I'm open to it on your behalf. I haven't heard the council tell me you're not interested in working with the property owner.
Okay, because I want to make sure we're being fair. That's all I'm saying. All right.
Oh, I've got a question for Mr. Simpson. I was looking at the license agreement, and my understanding from reading it is that, yeah, the city provided this access cost-free for the landlocked property. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's no money being exchanged.
Okay, so it was.
I mean, cost-free is,
Well,
there probably was some expense on their part for
oh, but
mowing and other things, and there's some,
the city didn't get any money.
but it's not a revenue thing, or we didn't exchange goods for the,
Okay.
for the license.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure. Thank you.
My comment was sort of back to Mr. Downing's questions. We are obligated now that we entered into that developers agreement with the person who purchased lot I to deliver to them a lot free and clear of encumbrances.
Yes, that's my understanding.
And so we've got to do that. The only way we can do that is to remove this easement. That doesn't preclude the landowner from going back to that new owner, or coming to us, or coming to the property owner to the very south and asking them for access. They've got other options for access that they're going to have to explore. But we have to perform on our developers agreement and provide a lot free and clear, and this is the only way we can do it.
Well, you're also performing on the license agreement. Because the license agreement said there was going to be a time in the future. It was anticipated in the license agreement that at some point the city's gonna sell that lot, and we are gonna rescind the license agreement. So you're essentially performing on two documents, two agreements you have. Again, I'm for clarity, I did not provide you a recommendation of now what. I think we first need to deal with the two obligations I think the city has first, and then deal with a difficult situation. It's not, it's an irrational situation for a property to not have any access, but it's not a situation the city created. It's a situation that was created through agreements with property owner and other parties, not the city. And so we've tried to facilitate reasonable access where we have for 12 years. And so now there's got to be some additional discussions about what that would be. And for clarity's sake too, I haven't heard the council tell me we're done dealing with the neighbor or prohibiting staff from bringing you back something.
I'm going to entertain a motion to move approval for this, and in that sense, I'd like to be able to see if you can negotiate something with those groups if it's possible. So, Mr. Mayor, with that, I move approval for consent agenda number 6.
Second.
First and second, any other questions? Yep.
I would like to abstain from voting on this since there's a family connection.
Anybody else have anything? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next move on to resolution approving 2024 through 2028 capital improvement plan. And our finance director, Josh, should have a little presentation for us.
By little, you mean brief.
Yeah. Brief, very brief.
This on little and brief. Let me see if I do this correctly here. That looks right. So, thank you, Mayor and Council. I am going to provide a brief overview of the 2024-2028 Capital Improvement Plan. You've now seen this in 2 workshops, and this is coming to you for approval. Just a reminder, you see a lot of bullet points here. Again, promise brief. But just a reminder, you're approving the plan in concept at this point, and you will do appropriations actions for the 2024 portion of this plan for budgeting purposes in November. And then, of course, in the future, as specific projects come back to you for approval, you'll have the opportunity to approve specific projects at those times as well. So just to quickly recap what you're approving, or being asked to approve rather, over 5 years, the capital improvement plan totals $80 million, with utilities being the largest share at just under $26 million, followed by $13.6 million in community development projects such as the Kinney Corridor implementation, $12.8 million for tax increment district projects, $9.8 million for facilities, and you can see the rest of the list there. The funding sources for all 5 years, the majority, the largest share of the funding comes from general obligation borrowing. Now, this is the biosolids project, so we'll actually be completing the borrowing for that this year. In fact, you already approved those initial resolutions. The reason we're categorizing it this way is because the majority of those expenses will actually occur in 2024. And then there's also borrowing in the plan for the fire station. And then utilities cash financing, followed by grant revenues, and you can see the rest of the sources there for all 5 years. I just wanted to provide a brief, kind of a top 10 selection of the largest projects for all 5 years of the plan. You can see that of the $80 million total, these 10 projects represent $52.7 million of that total. So Kinney Corridor implementation is the largest, followed by fire station. Ongoing implementation, that would be development dependent in Man Valley Corporate Park, the biosolids facility, and you can see the rest there. So then just getting into levy-funded projects, you've seen this already, again, twice, I believe, at both workshops, but the estimated mill rate, and again, this is cash financing with the levy. This isn't the debt service portion of the projects that are funded via the levy. This would be cash financing of capital projects. The estimated mill rate in 2024 is 42 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, and then it steadily decreases. It pops back up in 2027 to 15 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, and then it tapers back off again. So 7% of the share of the levy would be for cash financing of capital projects in 24. The remaining years would be under 5% of the levy. And this goes back to conversations I had with you all about the fact that we're having to apply more levy over the next 5 years towards operations and ongoing effects of inflation. So estimated general obligation borrowing, again, I will just call your attention down to the row third up from the bottom that says estimated percent of limit. So this is the estimated percent of the state's limit for our total general obligation indebtedness. And we reviewed a similar slide to this when Ellers was here as part of the initial resolutions for our general obligation borrowings. We estimate that will be at 49% of the state limit in 24, taper slightly in 25. If you trace this over to 2027, you'll see it pop back up, and this has to do with contemplated borrowing in the future for the fire station. But in any case, we don't exceed 50% of the state limit. Projected general obligation debt levy by year. So I just a couple slides ago talked about the cash financing portion of the capital improvement plan. This is the amount of mill rate that would be applicable to debt financing of projects in the capital improvement plan. So you can see the estimated mill rate is 80 cents per $1,000 in 2024. And then it actually, in this case, steadily increases, and it would peak at $1.28 per $1,000 of assessed levy in 2028. Now, this is because of some shifting that occurred with the fire station project. That said, you just heard from our partners at Merchant McIntyre earlier. We have $1.4 million in federal funding that is applied toward the project in the capital improvement plan. That leaves a balance of $7.6 million. That at this point we are just assuming is general obligation borrowing of the city, understanding of course that there are ongoing conversations with the Rural Fire Association. So this mill rate you see would be kind of like a worst case scenario, assuming we cover the full cost of the $7.6 million debt service for the fire station. We'll likely be coming back to you at some point in the future with a different version of that. So that would be kind of worst case scenario, in other words. And in any case, it does not exceed 20% of the total levy, which is the target that we're aiming for in the fiscal plan. So we don't exceed that limit by doing this. Some projects of council interest then not included in the current CIP. This list is, again, something you're seeing now for the third time. Hoffman Park Master Plan implementation, Glen Park Master Plan implementation, Public Works Building expansion and renovation, dog parks, Downtown Master Plan implementation, and Downtown Alley upgrades. So 2024 projects by department fund, then this would be the portion that you would be asked to essentially be appropriating money towards in 2024. And you can see that that total is $18.1 million, with the majority of that being utilities, the majority of which is biosolids spending. The engineering portion, since that's a large number too at $3.9 million, that would be the South Wasson Lane project. And that's gonna be a combination of state funding and, ARPA dollars are involved in that as well. So you can see funding sources for 2024 is again, general obligation borrowing. This is for the $8.5 million biosolids project and $500,000 for fire station design. Grant revenues, again, are a large portion of this as well, with that state funding for South Lawson, utility cash financing, and then revenue borrowing for development dependent projects. Selection of largest projects for 2024. So of the 18 million on this slide, 10 projects represent about $15.5 million of that. And you can see what those are here. And at that point, that is all I have. So you're being asked to approve.
Oh, Josh,
Yes.
could I ask you to go back to your top 10 at the very beginning?
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, that one. So just for full disclosure here, if we run through that list, I don't want the vast viewership at home that I know we have to get confused that they're going to be funding all 52 million. If we go down the list really quick, bullet points, could you just talk about, or Mr. Simpson maybe can talk about the opportunities for grants, different things that we're getting. For instance, the Kinney Corridor implementation, we know we've been talking with the Corps of Engineers, and that's a significant number. Fire department, we got $1 million for. So could somebody just run down the list and point out the highlights of?
Well, I can help you on the macro first. Maybe that's helpful. There is significant grant financing. In the case of library projects, there's significant expectation about community fundraising or donations to the foundation. So in the same period where you see $80 million of spending and 52 million here, you're retiring about 10 million of general obligation, and you're replacing it with 20 million. So you're only adding about 10 million net of general obligation debt. I think I read that right, Josh? So that should give you an understanding of, like, if you're thinking how much taxes are going into
Okay,
this.
that's a good way to come at it. Yep.
There's the percentage of taxes used to pay for these projects is, well, 10 million out of, or I guess you should include the full 20 million of new borrowing. It's not new taxes because we're retiring, but 20 million out of the 80 million is in general obligation. And then you had a slide there showing how much is revenue back versus.
Yep, let me find that one.
So even though we're borrowing on the general obligation of the city, you can see that, you have less that's levy backed over time. Not over time, but that's what we're at for a total obligation over time. So there is I don't know if it's helpful or if you saw something in the memo that you thought was helpful in trying to separate that for you, but there's a table on page 40 of the agenda. For example, South Wasson Lane reconstruct, 3.4 million. That's a project that's substantially financed with grants and donations. There's almost no levy in that project because it's a combination of a state and federal financing and the use of ARPA funds that the council has allocated to that. Kinney Corridor implementation has very little levy in it as far as the project sheet out of the 13 million or so that were showed there, because we are operating under a resolution the council passed that you don't want general obligation or general property taxes for those projects. So it's typically electric utility revenue, and we're expecting or hoping about $10 million in federal financing. We've already secured 1 million in state financing through a grant. We expect that to be at least 2 million. So out of the about 14 million, I think that's shown, I think it's about 1 million electric utility, 2 million state of Wisconsin, and 10 million federal. So that gives you an example of.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the residents, like I said, watching, don't go, oh my God, they're gonna nail us for 50.
The significant impact on taxes in this CIP is the fire station.
Right.
If the council chooses to follow through on the CIP, which I expect you will, that wasn't a setup for something down the road, but that has the greatest impact on potential tax implications, because the likelihood of us getting 80% or 75% funded through some grant program is not likely. Right now, we're pretty excited about getting 20% of it financed through a grant. So that one has limited ability for us to leverage some other resource. You can't sell enough pancakes and sausage, feeds to finance it. So that's one that has the biggest impact on taxes. Unless there's something else I'm missing that has a significant tax impact in this capital. Of course, your equipment, snow plows, trucks, those are all hitting. Police cars, those are all hitting the levy.
Yeah,
Library.
police roof, Main Street reconstruction, it's about $1 million out in 27 and 28. Vehicles, as Scott mentioned, that's about $870,000 that we're contemplating as general obligation notes. So you'll see a levy impact for the debt service on that. That's really about it. When you look at the total amount of levy-backed borrowing that we'll be doing, the fire station is the bulk of it. We would categorize, you won't see it here because it's part of the revenue-backed row, but the biosolids would be considered part of that existing debt row at the top because we're technically borrowing this year for it. Yeah. It's labeled as general obligation bonds, so technically speaking, it would be backed by the full faith and credit of the city, but we're expecting sewer utility revenues to pay for that debt service.
Thank you. I think that's a good recap for those watching at home.
Okay, anybody else have any questions on the capital improvement plan? Okay, thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Okay, got a first and a second?
Do we?
I don't think so.
I don't think we
Make a
do.
motion or no?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we approve the 24-28 capital improvement plan.
Second.
Okay, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next one is a resolution providing for the sale of approximately $5,030,000 of water system revenue bond anticipation note. And there's no presentation, but staff's here if council has any questions on this, but I will take a motion on this.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, first and second, questions? Yep.
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next, administrator's report. Scott's got anything for us, or?
A couple of upcoming dates. August 15th, 6 through 8 is the U.S. Army Corps Kinney Corridor Aquatic Ecosystem Study. So they'll be sharing the process they're using for the feasibility study. That's an open house style at the library from 6 to 8, so you don't need to be there at a certain time. And there will be comment cards, I think official U.S. Army Corps of Engineer comment cards for folks to fill out and speak with. August 17th from 4 to 6 p.m. is the 2023 Customer Appreciation Event. Join council members, staff, board, commission, and committee members at City Hall Plaza on Thursday, August 17th from 4 to 6 for this year's celebration, the Great River Falls Picnic. This event is free and all are welcome. We will have brats, corn on the cob, watermelon, root beer, ice cream, and we also, Mayor, will have Beyond Burgers again. And live music, yard games, bounce house, touch a truck, and more. The board of review was adjourned and will reopen on August 22nd at 6:15 in front of the council meeting. That's at 6:30. And then I believe this is the last one of the summer, August 24th, 6 to 7:30 cookout conversations. Is there two more?
I think
One
there's
more.
two.
There's one in
August
September.
and September.
I'm glad you guys are on top of that. September. So the August, so another chance to have a free meal with the mayor and city council. That would be August 24th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. at DeSanctis Park.
Okay, anybody got anything?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
First and a second to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.